All right, so we'll look to call the meeting to order. I'll look for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, look for introduction of new business items. So just as you know, today will be my last board meeting. But just want to congratulate Municipal Council on appointing Councilor Maureen Cassidy, and she'll be sworn in on Monday, January 20th. I'm not seeing any new other business items to be added at this point. Look to the board to see if there's anything else. So we'll get right into the meeting. So we'll handle number 4 towards the end, the election of the chair and vice chair towards the end of the meeting. But we'll get started with Bank of Canada presentation. And I see we have a few guests, so whenever they're ready, they come on up and give us that presentation.
Good afternoon. Thank you. So my name is Yvonne DeLint, and I'm the Deputy Managing Director of the Currency Department at the Bank of Canada. And it's a real pleasure to be here today to present certificates of recognition to Detective James Galbraith, who I understand is now retired, and Detective Paul Ferreira, and Detective Constable Stephen Daly for their work on the investigation related to counterfeit currency that began in February 2017. The investigation focused on the production and possession of counterfeit Scenes of Canada $100 and $50 bills. And they were being passed in various locations in London. The outcome of this investigation resulted in charges laid against 2 individuals in possession of counterfeit money, making counterfeit money, and an additional charge of forgery was laid against 1 individual. Following a guilty plea in March 2019, one of the individuals was sentenced to 180 days custody. Detective Sergeant Ryan Scrivens wrote that the investigation demonstrates the type of results that come from criminal investigations that are conducted by dedicated, trained, and resourceful investigators who are willing to systematically and dogmatically complete an investigation in an effort to reduce victimization in our community. Detective Sergeant Scrivens went on to say that these traits were all demonstrated by Detective Galbraith, Detective Constable Ferreira, and Detective Constable Daly during the course of the investigation, and they are more than worthy of formal recognition for their dedication to duty. It's always a privilege for the Bank of Canada to acknowledge and honor those who are directly involved in protecting the security of our banknotes. Counterfeiting is a serious crime that causes immediate financial loss to the victims and has potential to undermine the confidence in the economy. The partnership that has developed between the bank and law enforcement over many years has been an exceptional success story. We measure counterfeit in parts per million, and the bank's target right now is to have parts per million below 30 parts per million of notes in circulation. Well, in 2004, Canada was experiencing a steady rise in the level of currency counterfeiting, and at its peak, our level was 470 parts per million, and it was the highest out of the G10 countries. In response to the situation, the RCMP, in partnership with the Bank of Canada and Public Safety Canada, developed a national counterfeit enforcement strategy. Functionally, the strategy led to law enforcement resources focused on prevention, education, and enforcement activities related to counterfeit deterrence. The strategy provided support for investigations and public outreach across the country. In our efforts to drive down counterfeiting, the bank has worked with all levels of law enforcement, and I'm pleased to say that the current level of counterfeiting today in Canada is 16 parts per million. With counterfeit levels now well below target and priorities shifting, the funding for the National Counterfeit Enforcement Strategy is set to conclude in April 2020. In anticipation of this, the Bank of Canada has been working to develop an alternative strategy to engage with law enforcement. The outcome we are seeking is an approach that will right-size engagement, moving to a model that is both scalable and aligned to the current threat. Ultimately, our goal is to keep channels of communication with various levels of law enforcement open so that we can, 1, maintain strategic oversight to the counterfeit landscape, and 2, ensure that we continue to be positioned to respond to changes in the threat environment. The role that law enforcement plays in ensuring the counterfeit levels remain low cannot be overstated. That's why the Bank of Canada places such a priority on maintaining our relationship with this community and recognizing excellence demonstrated by law enforcement in the fight against counterfeiting. It's now my pleasure to ask Detective Galbraith, Detective Constable Ferreira, and Detective Constable Daly to join me for the presentation of these certificates. Gentlemen, thank you all for your dedication and commitment.
Can we maybe just move forward here for a photo? Follow-up, if you would, please.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. And again, I want to also congratulate on behalf of the London Police Service Board, and I'm sure administration has had an opportunity to congratulate. Oh, sorry, it's back on. I guess they think it's end of my term already. But so again, congratulations to you all, and thank you for everything you do. And to the one gentleman who's retired already, hope you can't see your face because there you are. Hope you have a great retirement, and thank you again for all you do for London. And I'm going to turn over to the chief.
Thanks, Chair. These are very difficult investigations that our officers are involved in. The counterfeiting investigations are very time-consuming and require a lot of skill, patience, and perseverance. So it's always nice to be recognized internally, but when a partner such as the Bank of Canada come forward and recognize the good work of our members, we really appreciate it, and we know they do. So thank you very much to Yvonne and her colleagues for coming out today and doing this for us.
Thank you very much. And thanks again, Bank Canada, for coming and joining us today. Much appreciated. And we won't take offense if you have to step all out, because I'm sure you looked at this if you weren't sure. So members, thank you very much. So members of the public, as well as board members, will be hearing a board delegation from London Towing Association. So I believe if they're ready to come on up, I believe Mr. Caranci will be leading his delegation. Welcome, of course, Mr. Caranci. It's always great to see you. He's a proud Ward 3 resident.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing us to be here. I just want to correct one thing. This is not the London Towing Association. We are in the process of bringing that entity back, and just want to make that clear. I'm here today with 3 members of the towing industry in London, Fadi Ibrahim from Low Price Towing, and Dwayne and Clark Cameron from Sturdy's and Clark's Towing in London, who are very big in the business, in the industry, and want to present what we want to present today. I'm doing that on their behalf. So again, thank you for the opportunity. And before I start, Mr. Chair, again, thank you for your service and work with the London Police Services Board. I think you've done an outstanding job over your term, and sad to see you go. But again, there are other people that will take up the torch, I'm sure, and do a good job. So thank you to everybody for being here today. As I've said, I've introduced the people that are here with me. I know that a few of you were in attendance at the meeting where we presented to council. I believe it was in late November, early December. And we have been in continuous conversation with city staff after that meeting to put our views forward and hopefully change some things in the industry for the better. We met a few weeks ago with Chief Williams, and thank you very much, Chief, for allowing us to meet with you. I think that was a very productive meeting. Again, the suggestion to come here and to provide you with our concerns, I think is going to be helpful. And I know that you and your staff that were there were very helpful in listening to us and giving us advice. So again, thank you for that. I just wanted to point out the genesis of why I'm here stemmed from Councillor Lewis at City Council here, bringing forward some concerns, I believe, about 9 months ago to the council regarding some issues within the towing industry that were causing concerns to the consumer. And the people that I'm representing here today are ones who are very concerned about those concerns from the general public, and want to make sure that those are dealt with and the industry is cleaned up and things proceed in a better manner. Having said that, there is a concern as to why these things did have occurred, or why we see that they become even more prevalent over the past few years. And I understand, I will put forward first and foremost, I understand you may hear me use the term contract. I understand that you may not be able to speak to that because of legal concerns and legal implications, but it does not stop me from telling you what the concerns are, and that is the major concern with the industry today. The big concerns that were brought forward regarding the industry were the term chasing, and just to explain that to you, chasing is when there is an accident scene, there are tow truck drivers who will run to that scene. Some of them will do it in a very unresponsible manner, going over the speed limit to get to a scene in order to pick up hopefully some business. That has been something which has become, again, more prevalent today due to the fact that there is a contract in place, and that portion of the industry, which is a fairly large one, substantial one, has dried up because they're not really allowed to attend scenes anymore, because the police have the ability to contact the contractor who was tendered and accepted through the London Police Services, and conducts that business now. That is one of the things. Also, the heavy-handed solicitation of those who attend the accidents and try their best to get the business, and sometimes do it in a manner that is not conducive to good relations between the customer and the business. We want to make sure that we put a stop to this. And the only way to put a stop to this is to clean up the industry. There are a few things I don't know. I think you all have a letter that I did send, and I want to thank Ms. Foster for her patience with me in getting this letter to you. But there are a few things that we've brought forward that we would like to do. And I want to bring up the fact too, we also had a meeting with Mr. Katolik and staff here at the city that went very, very well. And our concerns were listened to, his concerns were listened to, and we are prepared to go forward with the city in fixing, again, making things better for everybody. But what I wanted to focus on was, again, the contract. The reasons the problems have occurred to the point where they have occurred now is because there are people in the industry who have spent countless dollars, hundreds of thousands, if not close to millions, on procuring the equipment that they have today in order to provide that service. There are very good operators in the city. And because of a few, they lost the ability to take that business, which has been tendered out to somebody else. It has been a few years now. I don't know exactly how many years, I believe 2 or 3. And what they want to do, and I will say it very clearly here right now, is that contract is up for renewal at the end of this year. We are of the opinion that that contract should not be renewed. But having said that, we would like to go forward in partnership with London Police Services and with the City of London in forming a London Towing Association that will put rules forward, very stringent rules for the industry to follow. And those who follow them are able to pursue the business. Those who don't follow them will be on their own. And we want to make sure that we have the Police Services Board has put forward through the tendering process various parameters that the contract, or those who do the work have to follow, and we are very open to, again, putting those rules forward and following them. So what we're asking here, in plain and simple terms, is do not renew that contract at the end of this year. we're asking that you allow us, I'm going to say, and I don't know how long you have until you have to announce or you have to provide notice to the contractor now, how long you have to provide to them for them to go forward for another year. We would hope to have before that time something in place that is palatable to the London Police Services Board and the City of London in order to change the business, so we're not back at where we were before, where we have providers who are unreliable. We want to have providers that are reliable on the service, providing it to the citizens of London, and make sure that that is back up and running properly. So we're here to help get rid of a problem that has been brought forward by Councillor Lewis and some other council members on City Council. I believe in speaking to, it's funny how issues at times you don't think have a lot of traction in the community, but this is one where people have approached me after they heard I was involved and said that they were surprised that there was only one provider to London Police Services, and they don't think it was fair. Having said that, the past is the past. We'd like to go forward. We would like that the operators provide services to London Police Services and the citizens of London in a very professional, respectful manner. And we want to go forward forming that association with your input, with the City of London's input, and then we're able to provide the services, again, more professionally in going forward. So that is really the gist of my presentation. I don't want to take up a lot of your time. We do want to know, though, at some point soon, if you're prepared to be a part of what we would like to do. I think it would be beneficial to everybody to do that, and we're hoping that that does come forward. I ask that you, if you haven't read the letter, read the letter. There are some things in there that we're proposing. If you thought there was anything that we should propose more or we should put in there more, we are open to suggestions, and we want to make sure that we do things that are collaborative and not just dictatorial in one way, we don't want to tell you what to do. We want you to tell us what you feel and come to a conclusion that everybody's put together a good idea. So that's what I wanted to say, and I thank you for letting me say it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Caranci. Maybe you'll just stand there for a moment and just check to the board member if you're okay with hearing any questions from us that they may have. So just looking around, seeing if there's any questions or comments from the board. Vice Chair Toth?
Sure, go ahead.
There you go. That's okay. You didn't want to hear my question. No, that's not true. Thanks again. I appreciate you coming. It's always great when we have people trying to form those collaborations and informing us. I'm cognizant that this issue is largely operational, so I just want to be careful about straying too much into details that are operational when we're a governance board. But just in terms of, for my own understanding, perhaps, you've mentioned this list that you've put together of some of the where you're headed. You've also mentioned, obviously, that this renewal is happening potentially towards the end of the year. What's your timeline, and is this an incorporated entity that you're putting together? Is there going to be an employee?
Again, those are some questions that we have to answer ourselves. We're in the process right now with our legal people and getting that done. There was what was called a United Towing, which I have partial understanding of how it was. I'm newer to this file, but there was a association in the past. It is not working at the moment, but we're trying to revive that, bring it back with some, I guess, some better management for it to deal with those issues that are there. Our timeline would be your timeline. We would, like I asked, if there's a 6-month lead time before you have to sign a new renewal, we need to know, because we want to make sure that we have information before you so you can make an informed decision on allowing the contract to expire and allowing the fairness to return back to the industry that was there before. Again, knowing that there were some issues that we had to fix up. So that's what we're looking for from you. And we're prepared. As I said, we've had a very good meeting with staff here. They're very pleased with what we're presenting to them. We're very open to what they're presenting to us, and we want to continue with that dialogue and, again, do it with the London Police Services also. And that's why we're here asking, can we do that with you too? I'll turn my...
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Crancy, for your presentation. A couple of questions, if I can. I read the letter. Certainly, my first comment is it's aspirational. Things around training, code of conduct, and like, I don't think anyone would imagine that wouldn't be part of this. Here's my question, though. If for any reason the contract was not opened up, this is more of a curiosity from my standpoint, but if for any reason the contract was not opened up at this time, would the association still be formed?
That's a good question. Again, the contractors that you see, or the providers that you see behind me are very committed to the industry. They're very professional in the industry, but they understand that there are others out there. They've been in the business probably the longest. They have, I believe, some of the largest operations. So they would have to provide some mentoring possibly to those who are not following the rules or not doing business in a way that they possibly should. It would be difficult to control those who don't want to be a part of this. We understand very clearly that not everybody may want to be a part of this, and those who don't have the, as I said, if there's rules put in place and parameters for people to follow in the association, if there's somebody there who doesn't want to follow them, the association will make it very clear and say these people are no longer part of it, and they would have no problem in informing the City of London, and we spoke to Mr. Katolik about that the other day, and he was happy to hear that we would inform them saying they are no longer part of this, and if there are things that happen with them, that is, they're at issue. And if there's a rotation, which we hope we would go back to those that are qualified, they would be kicked out of the rotation. They would not be able to provide the service anymore. Once they've been warned and once they've been told, we think we're able to control that type of thing. And again, with the city's help, if the city has, the city right now is looking at how to regulate the industry. We understand that there's an aversion to regulation at times, and I get that. But this one here, I don't think you have to regulate too far. But I think that the industry will regulate itself better than the city may, and we'll be able to provide those services. And again, hopefully, we'll be at a point where everybody will be able to share in providing the service. It's very difficult, Mr. Mayor, that you have people that have spent the money that they have over the years, and then a large portion of that service or large portion of that way to make a living has been taken away from them, and when they haven't done anything wrong, and that's what's hurting them, and that's why they want it back.
Well, thank you for that. And Chair, I'm very mindful about slipping into operational issues as the Vice Chair has indicated, and I'll do my very best to stay totally away from that. The sense I have from your comment, though, the sense I have is that if for any reason the contract wasn't opened up, then it feels like from what you said that would cause some difficulty for this association to go forward. And I think ultimately that's the choice of the towing industry and its members. I don't think it's our place to tell you what the criteria should be in terms of what would be required to form an appropriate association. I think there are enough examples out there of the kinds of governance models that you might look at, and I don't think I would not even imagine us weighing in on that. But I think that when I hear what you said, listen, in broad terms, just for the sake of the industry's sake, I wish you well with that. But it really does come back to Vice Chair Toth's comments about timing as well, because I think from your standpoint, if you had said, regardless, we're going ahead because the industry needs that, that's interesting. But that's not what I heard you say, but perhaps that will be the ultimate intent, because everything, albeit your letter is aspirational, I think there were some very strong things in it, just as an observation. It didn't talk about delivery models or anything, but it simply talked about the professionalism of the industry, which I think without trying to digress to another body, there were a number of people that talked about that I've heard in a prior series of meetings, and I think that was helpful and hopeful. So irrespective of any outcome here, my own thoughts are that the towing industry would do themselves great service by carrying on with this notion of those rules and regulations and a standard of conduct and the like. So I'm not looking for a response, but you're welcome to as you wish, and then I'm done with that. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, if I could, just to answer that through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not here to tell you things that you want to hear. I want to tell you the way it is. These gentlemen behind me are extremely professional in what they do. They do it every day, and they do it with care. They understand that people that are in accidents have, they're dealing with a traumatic issue. They serve their industry extremely professionally. They're taking up the torch and they're taking up the cause to make sure they can clean this industry up. They don't have to. They run their own businesses very, very professionally. They want to. And again, I can't answer that in a way that gives you hope that it's going to happen. They've got their own businesses to take care of. They're going to need other people to be a part of this too. Others out there, if they don't see a reason for doing it, I can't speak for them. I'm only here speaking on behalf of these people. We've got a lot of work to do to try to herd the industry together and get them to follow the rules that we're going to put in place. And that's going to be a challenge, but I believe we're committed to doing that. So I hear what you're saying. I don't want you to believe that it's going to happen regardless, because there are other people out there that are going to be part of making this decision, and I can't speak on their behalf. We're going to do our best to get them, to round them up, and it's like herding cats, just like a lot of things are, but we're committed to doing that. Having said that, the biggest concern over the years that has caused the major headaches that we are seeing right now, the unintended consequences of the tendering, has caused what is there and caused it to be a larger issue. We want to make sure it's not. We want to make sure it's gone, it's taken away. The industry is very professional. And once they do that, once they're given that hope that they can conduct their business professionally, they will conduct their business professionally, and they will give the best service and the least amount of headaches to the people on the streets that have bigger things to worry about. Chief Williams, you've got bigger fish to fry on many things in the city, and we want to take this headache away from the London Police Service and make sure that things are going well.
That's very helpful. I'm left a little bit concerned about how many questions there still are, and I know you've said, we should tell you, and I'm sort of the flip view that you should be telling us what services you can provide. But setting all that aside, I think the biggest question, more from a governance perspective, is just making sure that whatever happens, it's not adding a burden to our police officers. So that really, for me, is going to be the #1 priority from the governance perspective, and making sure there isn't situations where it's, oh, this person was supposed to be, if there's a list and they're not answering, who's in charge, and things like those are those kinds of questions I want to see answered at some point. Now, I can let you know that we've asked for, or I should actually say more fairly, Chief Williams has offered to put together an updated report on the current status of towing in the city. And we're very grateful and thankful that he has offered to do that. And so we are expecting to get some more information from the policing perspective to give the board some more information. And so I think that'll be quite helpful, and hopefully in a timely manner, so that this conversation can keep going.
I guess one thing I want to say that I really didn't bring up here, but I know it's in the letter. There is an issue that you may not have a lot to do with, and that's something that is out of your bailiwick, I understand. But the issue of charges to consumers is there's such a gap between companies at times. The insurance industry is up in arms about it in the City of London. There are things that are happening that are no control of yours. They can't be solved by yours, but again, it's because when somebody has a monopoly, they can do whatever they want. And that's not right. And again, I just want to put that forward. And promise you, these guys are committed to making things better. They're committed to making, to doing what has to be done to make everybody happy. So we're here to do that. We're not wasting time. What we ask for, I guess I want to clarify one thing that you and the mayor have both asked, and that is that we're not here to say, tell us what to do. I think we're here to say to the police, tell us what you want to make sure we do right, how we do it. It's not like, you know, you got to do this or you got to do this. We understand from our business, we know our business best. But the challenges that have been there in the past, the challenges that are there today, tell us what they are and we'll do our best to clean those up and fix them. That's what we're talking about, that type of thing. So I know the police have many more things to deal with than dealing with this, but we want them to be partner in taking care of the issues.
Thank you for your presentation. Just to be clear on a couple of issues, and I do have a question for you. This is purely operational from a mechanics standpoint, and as such, it's deferred to administration, and we wish you all the best with regards to negotiations and discussions going forward. The contract is up for renewal 11 months from now, so that's really the timeline in which we're all working within. The administration will bring to the board a recommendation, and we'll make a decision at that point in time. The question I've got, and this would be, I would say, would be conditional on you being able to come together as an entity, but would you be prepared to present an unsolicited proposal for services based on the expertise of the industry prior to the decision of an RFP going out?
So do you mean, would we as an association present to you? I think that's really, in essence, what we're trying to do in making sure that all the members know what the criteria is that they have to provide these services. I guess let me be clear in this sense. If we know what the police are looking for in service, making sure the problems that they have had in the past, that they don't happen again, any member who breaches those conditions or those supposed rules will not be providing service, and the association will make sure that that happens. It'll be written into their constitution, in their charter, whatever they end up doing, that they know that if there will be consequences for them not providing professional service to people, and that I think is the best way. I don't know how we would go about as an association to provide a response to a tender, because if you have members, you know which member will take that tender. And that's why we're saying, tell us what you want, tell us what you're looking for, and we will make sure that that happens through every member, every business who provides that sort of service to London.
Looking to any other board members with any questions or comments? Jesse? Sorry, Deputy Mayor?
Just a brief question through the chair to administration, and just in terms of a rough timeline, if we're going to have a report that comes forward, when do we think that might be happening?
I think if we were to provide a report on the current state of the towing situation within 2 months, so the March meeting.
Seeing no other speakers, I just want to again thank you, Mr. Caranci, for coming today. And sorry, unless you wanted to say one more thing before you left. And I just want to also add it, so we heard March, there'll be an update received at that point. You're more than welcome to attend that meeting, and you'll be able to see that agenda posted up prior to as well. So again, thank you, and thank you to all your efforts and the people who have come in and continue to engage with the London Police Service Board. And thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you for the opportunity, and thanks for allowing us to come in and see you. Thank you.
Take care. So I'll look for a motion to receive the presentation. Moved by Deputy Mayor Elmer, seconded by Vice Chair Top. All those in favor? It carries. Great. So minutes of the December 19th, 2019 meeting. Look for a motion. Moved by Deputy Mayor Elmer, seconded by Mayor. Any discussion? All those in favor? It carries. Deputy McIntyre, quarterly reports, Crime Stoppers, and Pursuit Statistics.
Thank you, Chair, through you. Before you is our year end, essentially, for these reports. So they come to the board quarterly, on a quarterly basis. Obviously, the January report provides an overview for the last year. And the purpose of providing the report is not only adequacy, but it's to allow the board to look for trends and see our total numbers of different events, and really track changes or potentially identify issues. This report on a move forward basis is really, is very steady in the numbers. There's nothing that jumps off the page which we would flag as an error. I think one that is a little bit more interesting perhaps is maybe the risk associated to pursuits. And so you get to see those total numbers over time. And then how many, every single pursuit in the City of London is also reviewed. And then what can we do after that pursuit, if one does occur, to ensure that it's done with risk in mind and risk mitigation. So there's nothing that's jumping out on those. You see at a year at a glance, you see our Crime Stoppers numbers. Again, that program runs. You'll see the year at a glance numbers as it relates to that. So it's for your review, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Looking around. Deputy Mayor?
Just briefly, I wanted to comment that I'm glad to see that there were no injuries, either to civilians or police. I know that some of these pursuits can be very intense. You have to decide whether to continue the pursuit or not, and I know that one of the reasons that is a difficult thing to decide is I know you want to catch bad guys who are doing things that are not good, but at the same time you don't want to increase the risk of injury to people from people trying to evade the police, and I think it must be very difficult for the officers to try and assess all those situations, decide when to terminate the pursuit and when to keep going. And I think the fact that we have years, not just this year, but other years where there's just no injuries to civilians, no injuries to officers, yet there are these pursuits. And in most cases, the policy is being followed, even when it's not. You can see that it was pretty minor because there's not charges or anything like that. It's just probably some education training that's happening. But I just wanted to comment on that because I do think these situations can be very difficult. And I wanted to say I'm glad to see there's no injuries.
Seeing no further questions, I'll look for a motion to receive the report. Moved by Javid, seconded by Deputy Mayor Elmer. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor? Carries. Back to Deputy McIntyre, complaints against police.
Thank you. And again, through you, Chair. This report is kind of been in a waiting. We've spoke about it in many other board meetings. And really, this report is again looking at complaints received about the police and police actions. We have expanded it considerably, and the hope for that was truly out of education. The purpose of them, and you heard me speak about the Crime Stoppers and of course our pursuit, was really to see trends and to understand from a reporting perspective what's going on. So we've added several pie graphs, several charts, lines, just so you can see trends that pop out of that. One of the things that is interesting to note is it's not about the total number. I think that's often misleading. It is the total volume of complaints received, and then out of those, what did we action out? So many, as you can see from the report, are either screened out by the OIPRD, they're withdrawn by the complainant themselves, or they're deemed to be unsubstantiated post-investigation. And oftentimes through that 5-year trend, you can see on page 2, there's a chart that looks at 2019, we had 125 chief and OIPRD complaints, and out of that, 87 were either withdrawn by the complainant, screened out by OIPRD, or deemed to be unsubstantiated. So it's interesting to view it as a ratio. The other thing I looked at is how many times are we interacting with the public itself? So on average, you can see I did some math for you. You can see that we have on average about 111,000 calls. So if we did the math, it's about 305 calls for service that our members are dealing with the public, which is great. And out of that, how many of those calls for service actually resulted in a complaint? 0.2%. Out of those complaints received, how many were substantiated? And then you see that decimal place move back again, 0.1%. Or actually, so what I love to highlight there is not that the complaints do not come in, because they do, and we love that. I think that is a marker of education and having the police facilitate the process, but is also a reflection of truly the good work we do. When there is an issue though, again, you'll hear me say all of the time, that's our opportunity to flag it and to course correct, teach out. And so then you see those outcomes. When you look in a global scale, high level, okay, well, what is the public complaining about the police in relation to? On page 4, you'll see a pie graph that just looks at OIPRD complaints and the chiefs. I just grouped them together for you there to show the percentage. And so you see the bulk of them are discreditable conduct. So you see You see the breakdown there. On the back of the report is a glossary of terms. This will be included now moving forward in every quarterly report, just so you, as you're reading through this, what does discreditable mean? You can go to the back and look that up and see a bit of a definition of what those complaints mean. We know from our presentation in November that obviously the complaint process is heavily regulated. We have to follow, of course, our rule book, which is the Police Services Act, yet still kind of maintaining an employer-employee relation. We have to move forward. We have to course correct. And so you'll see kind of the outcomes be resulted in this report. So as we move forward, we're open to changing this. If you like certain things, if you don't like things, absolutely, it's a work product. It's meant for you to understand. It's meant for the public to be informed. And so we're prepared to move that forward as we see fit. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Deputy. And just before I turn to the board members, just wanted to say thanks. I know the chief had mentioned this as well as other executives, that they wanted to find a more different way of bring forward this information to the public. So thank you for doing this on such a timely manner. And so I'll turn over to Jeff.
I would just like to thank the administration and the deputy for this new structure and format. This is definitely layman's terms. It's much more user-friendly from a board standpoint. I just think it's an amazing presentation, and it certainly highlights the significant issues that we need to deal with at the board level. So thank you very, very much for taking the time to restructure this.
I wanted to echo those words of gratitude. It really is so comprehensive and so well organized. I like the way that the categories are broken down, and I like the way that you translate it into something that would also be accessible to the public. On that note, I do think that this report, the quarterly reports, as well as the excellent presentation you gave us a few meetings ago, all highlight the fact that there is a need for more public education on the process, and I hope that we can continue to disseminate this knowledge through our communication channels and think about whether we can utilize the website and other digital platforms and social and digital media to educate the public more about complaints using some of the infographics that you prepared. Thank you.
Everyone else has already provided their thanks, so I'll leave it at that. But a couple questions. One was, and this is something I raised when we had that really informative presentation a couple months ago, was in terms of tracking the complaints, the statistics are fantastic. I think it was very, very helpful to have how many calls for service and so on. Is there an internal method to make sure that when it's a particular police officer involved with any kind of, whether it's discreditable conduct, anything like that, how do we track to make sure, is there a greater issue here? Is there a mental health issue here? Are we making sure that that officer is getting the support? Is it highlighting something that people need to be aware of so it doesn't become worse? Are there systems in place to address that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. You can see the times have changed. And it's not so much that the officer's intention is ever to do something wrong, but is it almost a flag to a greater issue? And so as we have complaints, they are all tracked in-house. We have a big, huge Excel spreadsheet that tracks them all. And when we see names come up multiple times, it does trigger that. Obviously, the move is wellness in our building, and why in the why. Why is that occurring? And so now with, moving towards in-house psychologists and all of those things to be able to course correct, but then even more importantly, to have the conversation. So when you're seeing it, I think maybe in years past, it would have been, well, the officer, there would have been a critical comment made about the officer, not a pause to reflect, is there something else going on? So to answer your question, it is an amazing shift in thinking, and it's to track that. There are many dashboards through Stu, Deputy Chief, that could speak to that a little bit more accurately than I, but there's great dashboards built now that we'll see building in that electronically will start to trigger things. So it's an interesting concept, that wellness platform to look at. We do explore all of those things kind of constantly with exactly that in mind. Now that you know this, now that you know there's probably a greater issue underlying, how do we actually provide the support to our people so that we prevent this from occurring? At the end of the day, it's service and excellence in delivery and what's going on inside out proposition there. And so it directs our attention 100%. So it's a great question and a great awareness.
And then just a quick follow-up from the perspective of consistency internally. I noticed that, and I think this is very appropriate, you have informal resolution and informal discipline processes in place, which I think is, again, fairly standard. But in terms of public trust and confidence, is there policies in place to make sure it's consistent, so it's not, well, this person's more liked, so we'll do informal this way, and how do we choose what goes informal? Is there just a really clear, standardized method to make sure that there's consistency and trust in the informal process, which obviously is less subject to public scrutiny?
Yeah, that's a great question too. So is there a standardized process? So the PSA, the Police Services Act, governs and is kind of the driver of that. It is our rule book. So if we have matters that are serious, then they're treated differently. This is from the presentation, than less than serious. I say those two words, but please know that all complaints are serious, right? We take those at a serious level. It is then the direction that they go. So what determines the seriousness then of misconduct? There isn't an absolute white and gray line there. There is, of course, every case is reviewed very separately. There's mitigating factors to every type of occurrence. But you see, we added that in the glossary to help. These are the bullet points. This is how that decision is made. When something moves informally, there is a perception that, oh, they're just moving that informally because, of course, informal discipline matters are not dealt with in the public forum. That is not the case. And in fact, it then highlights my comment about kind of the employee-employer relationship. All employment matters, like no matter what you are and what corporation you're in, they are not public matters. In fact, they're dealt with inside. When we still have to highlight and are governed, and of course held to a higher standard and rightfully so, but when there are those issues that are deemed to be less than serious, it's appropriate to handle them internally and through then those channels. So what does that look like? Our working agreement, which is obviously bargaining, sets out informal discipline. And kind of those metrics for that. An informal discipline matter obviously runs off a progressive discipline model. That looks like counseling and guidance, admonishment guidance, training, admonishment guidance, forfeiture of 16 hours. Now it moves up and you can see that there's that trend. So we track each of those. We look at the circumstances, we look at the specifics of the misconduct, and then we slot it in appropriately so it's a consistent matter. Anything, be it formal or informal, of course, is reviewed by the chief's office. They are all investigated and they come upstairs. And so the chief's office looks at it as a team and again, deciding the direction of those. So really it is the case, not so much the likability or not, if you will, of the officer. It is the case, it is the facts, it is the circumstances that surround it that cause that direction. And again, the rule book kind of outlines how we can proceed.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Look for a motion. Motion to receive. Moved by Javid, seconded by the mayor. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor? Carries. Great. Thank you, Deputy, again. I'll turn over to Deputy Betts for revenue offsetting personnel cost report.
Thank you, Chair. This report comes due twice a year, and it really is a rather innocuous-looking report, but I think that it hides, without some due scrutiny, it probably doesn't provide you with enough really context for why this, although innocuous in appearance, is truly important to the functioning of this police service. And that's because, as you'll note from the report, we have a number of sources of funding that fall outside of the operating budget allotment here from the City of London. However, those funding sources are virtually totally cost recovery. So 100% cost recovery in very few cases. Yet each of these functions provided is important to the London Police Service, and the London Police Service operating budget makes up that difference. Should that funding be revoked or a program or a funding source canceled, that program or position is no longer deemed to be requiring that funding. So London Police Service would be responsible for either absorbing those costs of maintaining that position out of the operating budget or ceasing to provide that particular service. So you'll notice in Appendix A that one of the largest funding sources is the Community Safety and Policing Grant. This funding pays for the continued foot patrol deployment. However, has been the subject of considerable discussion here at the board. This funding was reduced by $639,000. That is a significant impact on our operations, and it's this funding that this community safety grant that allows us to continue to deploy our existing foot patrol unit. We're required to provide updates to the ministry regarding how many officers are dedicated to this program, who they are, they're accounted for by name, if they were deployed, and if they're not deployed, what was done to address that. Did we backfill that position with somebody else? It's very purpose specific, and all of that is to say it's program specific, and without it, we aren't able to provide that program. So again, it's just a little innocuous report, but with significant impacts here in the City of London. The other largest funding source that you'll see in that same appendix is the court security funding at 80 Dundas Street. As you know, of course, the Police Services Act directs that the board will ensure that security is provided, and then it's the adequacy standards that directs the chief to facilitate that. And as we've discussed previously, the funding provided by the ministry does not cover the full cost of providing security, and the allocation of funds are subject to change by the ministry. You may recall me stating last month that there are additional security measures being introduced, and that London Police Service will be required to provide the staffing for those measures, although there isn't a commensurate amount of funding to cover that. Our funding does not increase when safety and security enhancements are added by the Ministry of Attorney General. Appendix B on the other side provides information related to the number of positions that are funded for a variety of programs, and all of which again benefit London Police Service and the City of London. When a paid secondment position is eliminated or as the funding is no longer available, as you've heard me say, there's a decision that has to be made about whether or not to fund that position from the operating budget or reduce our complement by the appropriate number. If the position has resulted in an increase in authorized complement, then it's a bigger decision for the board to make. In fact, I would point out that you may have read in the Star just 3 days ago that the RCMP has disbanded the Ontario Financial Crimes Unit, and that is referenced in this appendix, and that information came to us between the time this report was submitted to you for the purposes of this meeting and today. So that's why you don't have an updated chart. Referenced in that appendix is the Integrated Proceeds of Crime Unit. We had a member seconded to that unit and have a member seconded there until the end of March. With this disbanding of that particular unit by the RCMP, we will no longer have representation for these types of crimes at the federal level. We are still engaged in the provincial level proceeds of crimes and asset forfeiture investigations, but again, this seemingly innocuous report has significant impacts on the operations here that we're able to provide. So I just wanted to take that opportunity to expand on that and provide some context. So really, I just provide this report for your consideration, and my recommendation is the board receive it for their information.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Moved by Javid, seconded by Jeff. Javid, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Deputy, for the detailed report. I think it is very important for us, not only as a board, but for members of our community to become acquainted with the fiscal reality that our service is facing, especially in light of the consultations and discussions that will be happening with City Council regarding the budget. We as a board, and I as a board member, take my fiduciary role very seriously in seeing the gravity of what these figures mean for our day-to-day delivery of the kind of safety and well-being that our community deserves. Leaves me with great concern. I hope that other members of the London community will also be concerned and be engaged in the budget process to ensure that we continue to provide the commensurate resources for our services to do the job that they need to do. So thank you.
Look for any other speakers? Seeing none, I'll just go from the chair and ask a question. Is it fair, Deputy, to say that our courthouse is used by, I guess, when something happens in another community nearby? Can you kind of touch on that, like St. Thomas, if someone does something in St. Thomas and be processed here, and kind of maybe just touch on that, and then I'll have a follow-up.
Yes, Chair, that is correct. However, as you know, the Police Services Act in Section 137 does direct that the police service of jurisdiction in which that courthouse falls has responsibility for providing the security there, and that in this case falls to the London Police Service. So irrespective of who is using that building, whether it be the Ontario Provincial Police, St. Thomas, or another jurisdiction that comes here, London Police are seized with providing that security.
So I guess my question, and it might be a hard one to answer, because it kind of might be a political one to answer, but I'm in the position of feeling as if, you know, some of those local communities should play a role in contributing financially, not necessarily sending St. Thomas police officers here, but their boards should maybe have an opportunity to be able to financially contribute to the security of a facility that is used by other populations around our area. So my question is would it be a benefit if I was to ask this board to communicate with the ministry to relook at that model specifically around that area where we're talking about the contributions of our surrounding services, police boards in particular, to help contribute? So I'm not sure who wants to answer that question, but I thought I'd ask.
That is a question that's fraught with an awful lot of nuances that I'm not certain that are going to be within the purview of the board. I mean, certainly, I understand that you have, as chair of the board, had already penned correspondence to the ministry with regard to the allocation of resources, financial resources, to help cover the cost of court security. And I mean, the province has their formula that they apply to that. It's out of our purview as to how they go about doing that, but I'm sure any correspondence with regard to cost recovery or cost coverage, you know, certainly helps to support the implications and the resources that we require.
Okay, not seeing anyone else, so I'll think about that. Maybe the board moving forward will want to consider something of that nature, just because I feel like you have all these people using our facilities, and you know, they're having instances in other communities, but we have to bear the cost, which is a little confusing to me. So it's been moved and seconded. Not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor, and it carries. Great, thank you very much, Deputy Betts, and we'll go back to Deputy McIntyre for problem-oriented policing initiatives report.
Thank you, Chair, through you. The problem-oriented policing report is a overview, a high-level overview from 2019. It is obviously part of board policy and adequacy. It is meant to really give a high-level framework, or a snapshot, if you will, of all things problem-focused in the community. And on that note, the community is the key. So it is really driving community engagement. It's an amazing framework as we modernize what we're doing, and you'll hear constant talk about that, but it is back to the community. It's back to the people. We're in the business of humans here, so it is that service delivery piece. How do we do that? How do we maximize what we do? How do we drive efficiency with our people? It is those community partnerships. Our core unit, a group of individuals, are specifically assigned to looking at chronic issues and chronic problems. They're out, of course, networking with all stakeholders and community members, and we see great return on investment with those activities as we identify chronic problems and work to solve those, which are not well solved on the front line in a reactive mode. So it is definitely high level. The report just kind of gives you a snapshot of, at a high glance, of those specific things that we do. Details of those specific things will come to the board, of course, monthly. This is, again, just to be high level. It's an amazing philosophy. You'll see this moving back in everything we do with our core unit especially. And again, highlighting that integrated approach to solving problems, to preventing problems, and truly driving community engagement.
Any questions for the deputy? Look for a motion. Moved by Ms. Elmer, seconded by Susan. All those in favor? Carries. Thank you very much, Deputy. Deputy Chief Betts, collection of identifying information in certain circumstances.
Thank you, Chair. So this mandatory report is being presented in accordance with Ontario Regulation 5816. And the story here is that there is no story. There were no regulated interactions during the course of 2019 reported. As you'll know, 2019 was the 3-year anniversary of the regulation, which meant that all sworn members were required to complete refresher training. That's comprehensive training to ensure continued understanding and compliance with the regulation. This training took anywhere, depending on the individual member, between 2 to 3 hours to complete, and absolutely no one is exempt from that training, including the executive that sits here today. This actually represents approximately 1,500 hours of mandatory training outside and above the rest of the mandatory training that we conduct throughout the course of the year. The Contents of this report will be included in the chief's annual report in accordance with the regulatory requirements. It's my recommendation that the board accepts this report for their information.
Great, so thank you very much, Deputy. So I believe it was moved by Jeff, or Jeff, you had a question? Moved by Jeff, seconded by Vice Chair. And I'll look for any questions or comments. Javid?
Thank you for the report. Of course, it's encouraging to see that the story is no story, but I think for me as an academic, that makes me want to lean into what might be really going on underneath the surface. I do know a bit about implicit bias training, and I think as you highlighted, there's been lots of effort around this issue, but training is only one part of the solution. So I hope that we can continue to not only work within the regulations and reporting, which looks like we're making progress and we have made good progress, but also ensure that many of the communities that were affected by what was happening in the past continue to engage with our service, engage with our business plan, and are part of a holistic approach to addressing some of the issues of the past. I also want to take this opportunity to acknowledge Councillor Salee for his vocal leadership and his courage in speaking up about the carding issue. This is an issue that many dismissed and had a lot of defensive reactions to, and it took a lot of courage to speak up and help make a difference for the communities that were disproportionately affected by it. So thank you for what you've done, and many more things to come, but on this specific issue, many thanks.
Thank you for the kind words. Look to any other board members for any questions, comments? Seeing none, it's been moved and seconded. I know to note, there was 2 less regulated interactions than occurred in 2018, if I can recall, if that was correct. So I'm not sure if you wanted to add on to that, because I know last year there was some training that wouldn't have to be redone for those people who had, I guess, there was an issue found in the past for those regulated interactions. So sorry, I'm just jumbling my words, but if you want to just kind of get at what I'm getting at, it'd be great.
Yeah. Chair, I think what I can say is that obviously that training worked for those particular members, or in that particular situation, we have seen no violations of any regulated interactions. There were no regulated interactions. You know, to speak to the points raised with regard to implicit bias and training, the London Police Service has continued to provide training in this regard. In fact, this current block of training for our officers involves intercultural competency training and some awareness. I sat in on the very first session of that this year to familiarize myself with what's being taught to our officers. So that continues, and I think we also have to recognize there are an awful lot of avenues in which police can interact with members of the public that fall outside the scope of this particular regulation, legislated opportunities to engage, but also there is nothing wrong with community engagement. And I think that distinguishing between a regulated interaction and a community engagement, we heard about the problem-oriented policing report, those are tremendous opportunities in which we engage our community every day without triggering what becomes a regulated interaction. So it does really reflect well on the continued understanding and comprehension of this regulation by our members.
Thank you very much, Deputy Betts. Seeing no further discussion, I'll look for, I believe it's been moved and seconded, correct? All those in favor? Carries, and thank you again. And back to you, Betts, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Plan.
Thank you, Chair, and I know that Jennifer has a document to provide to you. And this report's being brought to you for your information. This report is a rewrite and rebranding of what has been known since 2015 as the Diversity Plan. The new plan reflects our organization's continued commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it recognizes that together we're stronger. Most notably in the plan is the emphasis on our 2 values of diversity and inclusion. Diversity across racialized backgrounds, sex, gender, sworn and civilian, and equally as important, diversity in thought. The underlying philosophy of this plan is that together we are stronger. We're better able to meet the needs of our community and to support one another. The plan contains a number of metrics that will be used to measure and be reported in our annual plan, an annual report. And of course, it allows us to course correct if we find that we're not meeting our goals. Accountability will be achieved through semi-annual reporting to the Deputy Chief of Administration and annually to the board. At the Chief's direction, we will, when possible, have diverse representation on all selection and promotional panels, a message that's being actively communicated throughout the organization. The report illustrates the results of our internal census taken in 2013 and 2018, some of which were included in the board report in front of you and all of which are included within the plan itself. As part of our rewriting of this plan, and in keeping with one of the goals in the plan, was a detailed review of our processes regarding the collection and use of personal identifying information from job applicants related to gender, sex, ethnicity, sexual orientation, etc. The review was undertaken to determine compliance with legislation, including compliance with the Anti-Racism Act, Canadian Human Rights Code, Ontario Human Rights Code, as well as the data standards for the identification and monitoring of systemic racism made under the Anti-Racism Act. This analysis of our practices on the collection and use of storage of personal data confirmed that our practices do comply with the code. However, opportunities for improvement were identified to enhance our practice, most of which will be related to utilizing data collected to strategically focus our recruiting efforts, and they're factored into the goals in the new plan. Simultaneous to this review, we also identified that the provincial government has released data collection expectations related to police contact with members from diverse communities. As you know, of course, from our previous report, in the collection of identifying information in certain circumstances, but also now in relation to use of force occurrences where we come in conflict with a member of the public. This information shared with the Ministry of Community Safety and Correctional Services and the Anti-Racism Directorate. However, there was a conflict that we were able to identify, and that is that this now provides us with two racialized groupings to track. And so made under the collection of identifying information in certain circumstances, police services are directed to identify the perceived racialized group to which a member of the public exists, and we are to base that on the National Household Survey to allow for a population-specific comparison in regulated interactions. The Anti-Racism Directorate, when directing that we will collect perceived racialized groupings and use of force applications, has provided a different set, slightly different set of racialized groupings. They were unaware of the confliction, and efforts are underway now. We've sent some correspondence to the ministry, and there are efforts underway to map out what those differences are to enable us to accurately meet both pieces of legislation's requirements. Internally, we've made those adjustments, but this is a greater provincial issue, and it's been brought to their attention from the London Police Service so that it can be corrected. So at this point, it's just my recommendation that the board receive the copy of this report. I believe you all now have a hard copy of the report. A soft copy will be available on our external website as well as our internal website, and there'll be some communication strategy put in place to share that information with our members.
Thank you very much, Deputy Betts. I'll go over to Javid.
Thank you so much for your presentation and for the detailed report. There's a couple of comments I'd like to make. I do think that this was timely. The 2015 strategy demonstrated was right for the time, but this is a rapidly changing issue. I also want to commend you for addressing the fact that it's not just about diversity. By using language related to equity, diversity, and inclusion, you are capturing some of the way that the approach needs to shift. But I also think you've captured the word belonging in some of your materials, and that's a really important word for us to understand as a community. Within the plan, I appreciate all the points. I think there's lots of great things, but what I would draw attention to is what's clear from the plan is that the attention isn't just about recruitment and engagement. It's also about retention and belonging, and that's highlighted in the points where you mention the importance of mentors for recruits, the importance of longitudinal engagement with these communities. What I would challenge us to think about even further, to build upon this great plan, is to think about the culture of belonging within the force and how the issue of diversity actually does align with conversations that are happening related to stigma and wellness that are amazing conversations. If the service is one where members of all community feel that there's a culture of belonging and people feel that they can speak up about their experiences, particularly related to things that might be discriminatory, prejudicial, such as stigma or racial bias, then we're not just recruiting, but we're retaining, we're building a thriving organization. The last comment I wanted to commend you on is this idea of diversity of thought. I think that's very forward thinking. It's very much in line with this idea that we are stronger together, that diversity is not at all mutually exclusive with merit, and that a diverse organization is actually an excellent organization. So thank you for your efforts, and I look forward to seeing the continued reports and monitoring of this work.
Any other speakers? Seeing none, I'll just comment from the chair. I just wanted to also echo the comments of Javid. I think he really nailed it on the head. I think just even the naming and just what you brought forward today along really speaks volumes, and I'm very confident of the days and weeks and years ahead for the service. So kudos to everyone who was involved, and thanks for bringing this forward, and much appreciated. So I believe, look for a mover and seconder. So it's moved by Javid already, sorry, and seconded by Susan. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carries, great. And public correspondence. Just look for a motion to receive the public correspondence. Moved by Deputy Mayor Elmer, seconded by Susan. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Carries. Great, and we'll go turn over to new business. And seeing no new business. So the next meeting, but before we get to that, is Thursday, February 20th, 2019. But before we do that, there's just one thing we need to do, which is every year, according to the Police Services Act, we have to elect the new chair and vice chair. As you know, I'll be departing, and after, I guess, the election, I'll maybe have some words to say or go from there. So I'll look for any interest or nominations, seeing Vice Chair Toth. So I'll turn over to you.
Thank you, Chair. It gives me great pleasure to put forward Dr. Javid Sakara's name for chair. Dr. Sakara has shown over the past year and all the time he's been here to be a really thoughtful, committed member of the London Police Services Board. And I look forward, hopefully with the support of the rest of the board, to working with him as he leads the board into the post-Mosley stages.
So that's been moved by the chair, and I'll look to the mayor.
I am honored to second that nomination.
So that's been moved in second. Just for democracy's sake, I'll look to see if there's any other nominations or self-nominations. Seeing none, it's been moved and seconded. We'll call the question. All those in favor? And congratulations. And just before I comment on that, there's one more election that we need to do, which is the vice chair. So I'll look for any nominations or interest for the vice chair. Javid?
It would be my honor to nominate current Vice Chair Susan Toth as Vice Chair of the Board for 2020.
Great, so that's been moved. I'll look for a seconder for Vice Chair Toth, seconded by Jeff. Any comments, or are you okay? All right, so it's been moved and seconded. Look for any discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor? And it carries. So now I'm officially unemployed, but just to make it easier, I'll turn over the chair to Javid, because he'll chair the remainder of the meeting, and he might not have the agenda that I have laid out, which is done so greatly by Jennifer here, but the only thing remaining would be just some comments from myself, and then an adjournment, and then the open mic. So those are the only things that are left. So again, I want to congratulate you on your election as chair, and congratulate Vice Chair Toth on her re-election as vice chair. So I'm a free person.
Vice Chair Toth.
Thank you so much, Chair. I just want to take this opportunity to just try to express how wonderful it's been to work with Chair Salih. Beyond the fact that your appointment to the board and then becoming chair was incredibly historic, and I think you should be really proud, and I think the community should be proud of having had you serve as the chair of the board. Your endless support for diversity, equity, inclusion, your endless support for women, bringing that lens forward. I know a lot of people have a sense that this is a very difficult position. It's an honor and it's an incredible privilege to serve on the board, but it also comes with a hefty workload. People often just see the public meetings. They think we meet once a month for an hour and that's it. It's so much more than that. I've seen the work you've put in. You and I have had numerous phone calls, days and after days, 3 or 4 times a day, sometimes chatting. And it's just, I've seen your dedication, I've seen your commitment. You are going to be missed. I hope you miss us a little bit too on occasion, but I understand that you're moving forward. And thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for everything you've contributed to this board. Really appreciate it.
Any other comments? Chief?
Just to the outgoing chair, definitely a very busy few years in the amount of time that I've been, at least as a senior officer and in the executive. I've never known a time of more change. And with all that change comes a lot of challenges. And you've chaired the board throughout all that time that I'm speaking about. So I do appreciate, particularly since I've been chief, your willingness to listen to myself and the deputies, and to have those offline discussions. You and I talk probably weekly, and I sincerely appreciate the phone calls when I answer. And just kidding, I always answer, or I call back. No, I truly appreciate your willingness to listen, and like I said, we don't always agree, but we always have the conversations, and we always come to a solution, which is the most important thing. So thank you on behalf of the organization and the senior officer team, and congratulations and good luck with whatever comes next for you.
Any other comments?
I just want to say a couple of things. It wasn't that long ago, maybe 5 years ago. Mo and I were in the running to be on the police board as the council representative. So it was Councillor Turner, Councillor Salee, and me. And both Mo and I lost that particular vote. And, I think Councillor Turner did a good job on the police services board, but I know that it was really important to you, Mo, to, there's lots of jobs as being a councillor, but this is a particular responsibility that I know you took very seriously, and you didn't give up, even though we weren't successful at the beginning. And, eventually the board was expanded, and then Mo was the new appointee, so he became the third council representative. And I've been on the board now for just about 2 years with Mo. And I want to say that it's a huge amount of work being on the police services board. We're appointed to a lot of different boards and commissions and things, and they're all very important. But the police services board is a totally different level of commitment, and being the chair of the board is very demanding. And I wanted to thank Mo for your service. I think you did a good job while you're there. I'm going to miss you. But I'm sure I'm going to get a hard time from you about all kinds of police matters anyway. So I'll see you around the council horseshoe for sure.
Any others? Mayor?
I feel compelled to to make some comments because as the second newest member of this board now, that soon will be third, I'll achieve veteran status fairly soon. I have to say, Mo, I sincerely appreciate your leadership and a lot of the offline things that we've discussed to help guide and support the efforts of the Police Services Board. So heartfelt thanks. As has been echoed before, you'll be missed. But what's really nice about these kinds of things is you leave a great legacy. And I think it's the style of leadership and the commitment that you've made. And we just say thanks very much. We look forward to working you harder on council now. Cheers. Thank you.
Any others? On behalf of the board, I want to thank you for your service. I want to thank you for being someone who's not afraid to speak up about the issues that matter. And I hope that there are lots of young people in our community that can look up to you and know that there are always going to be opportunities like this to make a difference. So thank you for your service. Yes, Jen.
So as part of this group, but not a voting member, not a decision maker on the board, what I found most poignant with Mo, Chair Salee, is just that he truly does care very deeply about people, all people. And I appreciated always being asked to include my input And he never let an opportunity go past to, whether I was part of the decision or not. Sometimes he listened to my input and sometimes, mostly not, but allowing me that opportunity and just making me feel like I was part of the group. So I really appreciate that, and I've learned lots of new things about you, and he truly cares about people deeply. Thank you.
So I just want to thank everybody for those kind words, and I know I didn't have the opportunity to say it at council, but thank my colleagues at council for their kind words. It's really a privilege to sit in this spot. I think whether we're elected officials or appointed on boards and commissions throughout our city, I always recognize that what we do is temporary, and we need to sometimes recognize that we always need to make space. I made that difficult decision because I thought it was important we need more women on our police service board, and we need women everywhere. And I believe many of the challenges that we're facing require that very important lens, especially with the population that's half women. I know I recognize the lens that I brought forward, but I'm confident with the contributions that I made and the people who still remain on this board and the work that they're able to continue to build on and the work ahead, as we saw here today with the diversity, equity diversity, equity, and inclusion plan. I also want to thank, the association. Rick, I know, is here today as well, Dave Gilmore, and many of the members on the front lines every day who do the difficult work. And I know sometimes my words have an impact, and I recognize that because they need to continue to do what they need to do and put their lives on the line every single day. I'm confident that, with this board, in particular with the new chair, Javid, who's very strong in mental health, that we'll be able to continue to support our frontline officers because what they do is not easy. And a lot of times, even when I'm saying good job or kudos to them, it's not necessarily always further communicated out to the greater community. And they're not looking for thanks. And all they're looking to do is to continue to be respected and do the very important work that they need to do, but be supported, whether it's financially, whether it's, emotionally. I think this community, we support them and we love our police officers, but we need to recognize that they're all humans, and just like everyone here is on this police service board. I did want to, really thank Vice Chair Toth. Had a great opportunity to work with her over the years, and it's been a privilege to serve with her. She's definitely been a great support and resource in helping me look smart, and tapping into her and asking her many questions. I would say she's done a lot, more than any typical vice chair would need to do, and she's really always been there, and she's always stepped up and always been bold and doing what needs to be done for our community. And it's, when I talk to my little sisters and I talk about leaders and women who are making an impact for our community, and I'm happy that I can point them to people like Vice Chair Toth. She does a lot in and out of this police service board for women in our community. I also wanted to thank the chief and the deputy for always being open and frank with me and having conversations. I know I call them quite often whenever there's issues and try to learn about the position and, and what our communities are faced with. And they've always been honest and direct and transparent and tried to do better for the community. I know sometimes the community can sometimes ask a lot of them, but they never waver, and they continue to be leaders for our community, and they continue to do what's best for the community. And I know the chief is right. We don't always necessarily agree on everything, but we continue to be respectful, and we continue to work hard, and we continue to have a city that we want to ensure that everyone feels welcome and safe. And I'm confident that our executive is delivering that and can continue to deliver that for our community. I wanted to also thank Jennifer for making me actually look smart and making me always look prepared. Because a lot of times, with all the boards and commissions that I serve on, there's a lot. And Jennifer really runs the board behind the scenes. It makes me and this board look as phenomenal as it is. And it's all because of her. And we are a very demanding board where we do ask for a lot. And we do a lot more than many other boards across the country, I would say. So I'm really thankful for the work that Jennifer does, because she really does do the work of many people, and she does it so graciously. So I'm really indebted to you for making me look always prepared and on top of things. Ed, I wanted to also thank you. I know we have a limited time serving and working with you on the Police Service Board, but one of the things that stood out to me was your support from day one. And I know we didn't know each other on a political level, but I know you were very supportive of me coming on back to the Police Service Board after the election and serving on chair and having that confidence in me, not knowing much about me, but just the record that was put out there. And I thank you for believing in me, and I'm thankful for always listening and having an ear, and sometimes, your willingness to listen to my perspective on things. And I know we always don't necessarily agree, but, when I always found it that whenever I could present with you with facts and reason, you're always willing to listen and to support and help make a positive impact for a community. So that's very important, and you've demonstrated that, and I'm sure many Londoners are much appreciative of that. So thank you for that. Jeff, I know we've have a limited interaction with each other, and you are the newest person for now, up until I guess later on today. And I want to thank you for the experience and sharing your perspective and your business lens that I have almost no experience from. I would say there's a lot of things that people don't know from the community that Jeff has done behind the scenes, working with administration. We should try to definitely push out more of what his work is behind the scenes, but he's definitely been a good contribution to this Police Service Board, so I wanted to thank you for that. And I know I wanted to say one thing just to each member from the other executive. I know I talked about the chief, but I wanted to say to Deputy Betts, thank you for coming to London, and thank you for joining our team. And thank you for doing so much already and hitting the ground running and making a positive impact. It was great to be a part of the team to bring you here. And you've really had a positive impact, and I've learned a lot. And you've always been accessible. I've called you, I think, in the past, sometimes on a weekend or a Sunday or randomly at different hours of the time, and you've always been accessible. So, but I hope that that's not necessarily everyone thinks that's the standard. I've just been fortunate. So I know a lot of the senior leadership team respond to us in different times and different hours, and I'm very thankful. And I wanted to thank Deputy McIntyre, for also joining us and learning from you. And I never doubted that the fact that you could come and fulfill this role and do such a great job right out the gate. You've proven to the community, and you set a strong message to every woman who wants to be a police officer that they could do it, and that sometimes we don't need to wait. That it's your time, and you've done it, and you've proven it. And I have so much confidence in you, and I wanted to thank you for stepping up to the occasion, because I know we've put you in a very difficult position, having to do the work that you need to do, and being the first, because I know that's never easy. So I wanted to thank you for that. And Javid, I know I kind of touched on thanking you a little bit earlier, but I also wanted to really thank you because I've learned a lot from you on the mental health file, and you've been a great resource. And I think, you've made a positive contribution to this community. You've supported us very early on once you came on with your lens. You've chaired the Community Relations Committee, and you've done so much work. And you've also been accessible to me when I've called you on the random evenings and things like that. So I wanted to really thank you for that. And I'm very confident that you're going to do some phenomenal work. And I know many people probably don't know this or do know this, but you're also going to be the first, person from your community who's fulfilling the role on the London Police Service Board as the chair. And that should, you should be very proud, and your family should be very proud of your accomplishment here today. And I know you're going to do so much, and thank you for being a role model for the communities that you represent. Last but not least is Deputy Mayor Elmer, and it's, I saved him for last because we have the longest relationship, and I've known him for the longest. And I apologize to the members of the public who've probably tuned out on the live stream on this, but I wanted to make sure to say everything that I needed to say. Deputy Mayor Elmer has always been supportive. When people talk about diversity, inclusion, and being an ally, he walks the walk, and he really has been a continual ally. And this goes way, as he kind of alluded to when we talk about me trying to get on the Police Service Board, and I had to make that space for myself. I had to ask the province, and I had to ask council to support expanding the police service board because I felt that it was that important to bring my lens onto the police service board. And a lot of times I didn't have the votes that were there. Sometimes it was just me and Jesse moving forward and trying to get me on the police service board and doing the work that needed to be done. And many of some of the other issues that were raised in the community, Jesse has always been a staunch supporter and has always demonstrated to me to be more than just a friend, but a bestie. And I really thank you for your support over these many years. And I know I always ask a lot from council colleagues at times, but you've never wavered, and I'm always thankful for your willingness to step up and to assist. And I want to thank you for doing a lot of the work on the budget, working with negotiations, because I know that could be very contentious and a lot of work, but I think you've done a phenomenal job, and I'm hopeful council will support the budget. And to every Londoner who's watching and to all those people who supported me along the process, I just wanted to thank you for this opportunity. And last but not least, again, thank the men and women of the London Police Service for what they do every single day, and who never ask for any thanks, but just continue to look for our support. And that's what I'll continue to do from the outside. So thank you very much, and I turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you again. So we'll take a motion for adjournment. Moved by Member Lang, seconded by Councillor Salee. All those in favor? Against? Abstentions? Carries. At this time, we will pause and see if there is any members of the public that wish to speak to the board. Going once, going twice. Thank you very much. We'll see you next month.